All right, I have something for you to think about as I start here. If I were to walk up to any of you, I'm willing to bet, if I asked you a simple question, do you consider yourself to be a sinner? My guess is overwhelmingly the answer I'd get back is yes. Now, let me flip it around for a second. Now, what if I walked up to you instead of asking if you're a sinner, what if I walked up to you instead and asked, do you consider yourself to be a good person? How would you respond then? I'm willing to bet, once again, that this time there would be lots of different answers, and I'm guessing some of you probably, your gut reaction would be to say, yeah, I think I'm a pretty good person. And if you said yes, then I would follow up with another question, the one you see up here. Do you ever get tired of trying to be good? Trying to measure up? I do. And one of the blessings that I have really, in addition to taking a good hard look at my own life every now and then and seeing how I'm oftentimes falling into this trap of trying to be good, trying to measure up over and over and over again, is I get a chance to work with many ages, young to old, and I see how this plays out, maybe not in the exact same way, but it plays out in all our lives. I mean, think about teenagers as an example. Teenagers are under pressure all the time, trying to measure up, being asked to be good. You have mom and dad with expectations. You have brother and sister who you're oftentimes being compared to. You have a coach maybe that expects a good performance. You have a teacher who has homework for you to complete. And let's not forget maybe the most pressing matter, which is friends. What they say, what do they think about me? Well, once you graduate from high school, it all ends, right? We don't have to worry about that stuff. Well, the next thing, you might get a job and maybe find yourself in this position now. You want to be a good worker. You want to measure up at work, because if you're that good worker and that's the most important thing for you right now, it's probably because you could get that raise or you could get that new job or at least have something nice to put on your resume. You find yourself in a relationship with somebody, you get married, and pretty soon you find yourself having this struggle with trying to measure up to that other person, being good for them, in addition to trying to make that relationship as a whole look good to others. And then you have kids, and now not only are you trying to be good and measure up, but your kids are an extension of your own goodness, so you want them to be good, so people look at them and see not only that they're good, but that you're a good mom or dad. And your hope maybe as they become more independent that you'll be able to be that parent that people walk up to and say, your kids are so good. What did you do? And then maybe your hope is one day you can be, and I know some of you are in this position, you're grandparents, you have a whole family, you have grandkids, and for many people the hope is that you could be that wise sage, the person that everybody looks to for advice, the person everybody looks to and says, look at their family, look how good they are, look at, and we all know that all this stuff is a facade though. We know that we can try and measure up, we can try and put on this image of being good and measuring up, but it's just covering up what's going on underneath. We're disasters. And so we play head games then with ourselves afterwards, because we know we don't measure up. We know we're insecure in those different callings in life, and so what we'll do is we'll start comparing. So go back to those teenagers. So the kid who's getting good grades in class sits in the front of class, and he looks back and he sees this girl in dark makeup who doesn't have any friends, no boyfriend, and he says, you know what? I'm struggling with something, but at least it's not as bad as her. Or the kid who's playing in his game. He's in the big game. He's not performing as he should. You know what his comfort is? That guy on the bench. At least I play. See? Or the girl browsing on social media, and adults do this too, you see somebody posting something, they took great care in putting together this beautiful picture of themselves, and that person looking at this picture on social media is like, you know what, at least I'm not like that person who cares so much about what they look like. I'm better than them. And this continues. You go to work and you start to compare yourself to other people. I may not be the best worker, but at least I'm better than him. In my relationship, you know what? I may not always measure up. We may get into fights sometimes. And things may get downright ugly sometimes. At least our relationship is not like theirs over there. We're better. Or my kids, they they're energetic. But at least they're not like theirs over there. Oop, did I talk about my own? We do this, and then, as grandparents, I'm sure there's that temptation once again to look at other people and to say, you know what, my family's not perfect, but at least fill in the blank. And we do this all over the place. Her hair is much worse than mine. That person, they're fat and out of shape, and this person over here, and this person over there, and we play these games, comparing ourselves to others, so that we can lift ourselves up and say, I am good. Or at least better than them. That's a goal in life, right? To be better. To be good. I need the next slide. What I want to do is help you dig into this a little bit. I want to help you dig into this a little bit by taking a look at the reading today. And I'm just going to summarize it for you really quickly because I think it has a lot to say with everything I just talked about. So you have Matthew, tax collector, sitting at his tax booth, okay? And Jesus comes along and he says, follow me. Matthew gets up, follows Jesus. They have a party. And meanwhile, you have this other group, the Pharisees, grumbling, because why is Jesus hanging out with those people? And then Jesus responds by saying, well, it's the sick that need a doctor, If you're not sick, you don't need a doctor. What's going on here? To understand and to dig a little deeper and understand how this relates to us, I think you need to understand Pharisees and tax collectors. That's big. In this scenario, in this story, it's very easy. It's very easy to label the Pharisees as the bad guys. And that's what oftentimes are done. Maybe if you're familiar, you read the Bible a lot, you're used to the Pharisees being the bad guys. After all, they're the ones who don't listen to Jesus, think they have it all together, okay? And I got the ultimate trump card. They're one of the groups that plotted to kill Jesus. They're the bad guys, right? And meanwhile, we have the tax collector, Matthew, the poor, lonely tax collector, who's the good guy, right? I mean, we have compassionate hearts. We're sympathetic. Matthew's the guy who, if you got to understand tax collectors. Tax collectors, they were Jews living amongst their fellow Jews. They knew the people that they were amongst, okay? And they worked for the Roman Empire. So these conquerors came in, conquered that area, and so they hired local people to tax, okay? So Matthew was one of these local people. He was a Jew who was taxing on behalf of the Romans. And so it's easy for us to say, the guy's just doing his job. And how do his friends, how these people that know him treat him? They ostracize him. They walk right by his tax booth. Unless the only reason they'd have to stop is if they owed the Roman government something. Other than that, they would ignore him. And so it's tempting for us to say, wow, poor guy. He's the good guy. Pharisees, they're the bad guys. Not to a first century Jew. If you read this, not from a modern American mindset, the way this is meant to be read is actually the exact opposite. You see, the Pharisees were the good guys. They were the good guys. You see, the Pharisees were religious leaders. They were well versed in the law of the Lord, and people looked at them and are like, these are the guys that keep the law. These are the do-gooders. These are the guys that have their checklist together and do everything right. They're the ones you would expect to follow Jesus. Okay? They're the good guys. Tax collectors, on the other hand, little detail I didn't mention. Tax collectors were pretty wealthy usually. That's because not only did they tax the people they knew what the Romans called them to tax, they actually would take more on top of it. They'd demand more so they could fill their pockets. Tax collectors stole from their friends. How can I take advantage of you? That's how a tax collector thought. They were the bad guys. They were the bad guys. And so the question we have to ask is this: why did the bad guys follow Jesus? Why did the bad guys follow Jesus? Well, you'd expect the Pharisees to follow him, but they didn't. Instead, the bad guys followed Jesus. So this is where we do this. We play this game. Well, Matthew probably followed Jesus. We focus on that call to follow, and Matthew getting up and following Jesus, and we think things like, well, Matthew finally chose to live a better life. Right? He finally made a good decision. So he's not a bad guy anymore. Now he's a good guy. Or we play this game. Matthew had something inside himself that those Pharisees didn't have. That's why Matthew followed. And you see, we start what game with that leads to then? His faith was stronger than their faith. See? We're doing exactly what I talked about earlier. Comparison. Making Matthew feel better and pushing those Pharisees down. We're doing the same thing. So what is it? Why is it that the bad guys followed Jesus? Well, I think you get the answer in Jesus' own words at the end. The sick are the ones who are in need of a doctor. You know? He's not saying that only certain people are sick, and he's talking about sin. He's talking about the disease we carry. No, what he's saying is that if you're going to walk around and pretend that you're not sick and play this game that the Pharisees were playing, I'm good on my own. I look at my checklist. I'm so much better than that person over there. If I can play that game, I don't need a doctor, and that means I don't need God. So, why did the bad guy follow Jesus? Because he knew he was filth. He knew he had nothing to bring to God. He knew that deep down inside he had that disease. He was self-centered. He was prideful. He had taken advantage of people, and nobody had given him the time of day until this one person walked up to him and said, "Follow me." And meanwhile, the Pharisees are over here with their checklists, looking at Matthew saying, why is he following? Look, he is utter garbage. Look at all the things that we do. Look at all the things that he does not do. He does not belong. And therefore, by direct connection, they said Jesus should be out too. This is what checklists do, and this is what you see working with the Pharisees. Checklists have a tendency to build self-righteousness. You see this with the Pharisees. Now, I want to help you see something here. I'm not saying that checklists, like if you have a to-do list at home, I'm not calling you an evil person for having a to-do list. What I'm saying is if your life revolves around measuring up how I'm doing, if that is the core of who you are, this is what's going to happen. Self-righteousness. That's exactly what happened to the Pharisees. They covered it up, they clothed it in religiosity, but what they were really doing was living life based on how I am doing compared to those people over there. It was all about how I am fulfilling the law and how he is not. And what that led to was that second point, which is that checklists have a tendency, when it's at the center, they have a tendency to isolate, I know this about myself, isolate me, not only from others, but from God. It oftentimes starts on a horizontal level in regards to my relationship with other people. So I look at this other person, just like I was talking about earlier. I start lining up my checklist, and I look at this person over there, I start comparing, and pretty soon, I start to think that I got it all together compared to them. I'm doing so much better on my own, and pretty soon what I begin to believe is that hope comes from within me. And if there's any problem in life that comes along, it's nothing that a checklist can't fix. Is that biblical? See, that's that was the problem the Pharisees couldn't get over. They couldn't get over themselves. And so, I want you to think about this. I think the greatest way that you can consider how this plays out in a regular, everyday life is just simply in relationships. And think about a marriage. Think about a marriage and I think it's a great way because you see this. So, the husband's over here, the wife's over there, and the husband has his checklist, okay? And what's really happened as they've gone on, and by the way, his checklist also has some checklist items for her too. You need to do this for me, She's got some also. you know. And what happens is it's very easy then for this husband, for example, to sit over here and get lost in his own world, believing that he knows what's right. He knows everything. Same thing over here, okay? Building up self-righteousness, and all it does is it isolates. And so a marriage that was once built upon a promise is now built upon expectation. How are you doing? Really, the question is, how are you doing for me? You're not measuring up. You see? I'm the good one here. I'm the good one. I'm the one who's handling everything, who's doing everything. And what this does, it creates a vicious cycle of failed expectations, of anger, of hurt. This can happen not only in marriage relationships, but in any old relationship. You can see this happen, just a cycle over and over and over, and sometimes it can flat out end. And when you find yourself, I'm standing in the husband's place over here, so you find yourself in that position, it's very tempting. It's very tempting to add a few more items to that list then. Okay, so here's my checklist, and now the relationship's going down the tube, so I need to add a few more. Okay, here we go. This way I got to do this and do this and do this, and this will handle the problem. And usually that also involves what they need to do. See, as human beings, what we want more than anything else is simply to be loved. Proof of this can be found if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you screwed up big time. And all you wanted was for that other person, like say, imagine a daughter screws up. She knows she messed up bad, and all she wants is for her dad to give her a hug and say, says, I love you, I forgive you. But instead what he does is he hits her with all the ways that she's failed him. There you go. What we want more than anything else is grace. And when we struggle in our relationships with one another, by a direct connection, we are going to struggle with God, because we're going to say, what do you have to do with this, God? I have my checklist. I'm going through it. You can't do anything to help this situation. It's me. I'm going to handle it. And see, I'm just trying to measure up. And you see, that's why sinners love grace. Sinners love grace. Because when you understand how hopeless things are on your own, and how doing nothing but building relationships on expectations, on simply spending the entire life trying to be good, when you understand how futile that is, only then do you realize the depth of your own sin, that disease. Only then do you look in the mirror and you say, man, I am a wreck. And it's at that point you can look to God, you can look up at the cross, and you can see a God who offers you everything you've been looking for elsewhere, everything you've been looking for in here. You have a God who unconditionally approaches you and says, I know you're struggling, that whatever it is going on in your life, he knows right, he can go right to the core of who you are, of your being. And yet I love you. And you see, there are a couple reasons why we love grace. The first one is that it has everything to do with the one doing the loving. So you see, God's grace is this beautiful thing, because I don't know about you, but I walk through life so often and everything rests upon my own shoulders, and I believe that everything in life is all for me. And parents out there, I truly sympathize with the struggles sometimes, because sometimes it feels like there are just more things upon your plate. You're carrying all these things around. But when you look to God, what he does is he looks to you and he says, my love, my grace, my forgiveness has nothing to do with how you are doing. It has everything to do with me. So you look to God, you look to the cross, and that's God. It has everything to do with Jesus, and what you see up there is amazing. Second point. What you see is a God coming from the outside to you. You see, while I'm busy walking around, moralizing, trying to be good, and trying to manufacture this somehow inside, what God does is he comes from the outside. He comes from the outside to me. He says, stop. Find rest in my work. This third point's important. The reason why sinners love grace is because it's unexpected. You see, I sense this sometimes. We come into worship, and there is truth in the sense that we should expect that when I ask God for forgiveness, I can expect that he will forgive me because that's his promise. But do you realize that sometimes sometimes, I'm guessing if you're the same way as me, you walk in here and you expect the promise. And there's a temptation to think maybe there's something inside of me that merits that promise. Grace is unexpected because it's unconditional. God coming to me and offering me what I do not deserve. Feeling like a train wreck? Then you are in the right place today. Has nothing, because God's love for you has nothing to do with you. It comes from the outside, and it's completely unexpected. It has no basis on whether you earned it or not. And when you realize that, when the grace of God and His love and His affirmation, which have nothing to do with me, when it hits your heart, it changes us. And then we seek to, the response that His grace instills in us is to be walking reflections. I believe that a great gauge of how healthy a church is to kind of see, who are we attracting? Are you attracting people that Jesus attracted, or are you attracting people that rejected Jesus? And what I'm saying is, are we supposed to, do we as a congregation exist to attract people that have their lives together, that are perfect, are good? Or do we exist to reach out to those people who are sinners, who are broken, who are hurting, who need love? We all know the answer. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so encouraged being a part of this congregation. A little while ago, we started Genesis Community, and the purpose of that was to reach out to people and help them to see, people who had not heard about God's love in particular, I guess, and the fact that it's unconditional, so to reach out, and I am very proud of the fact that I work with a pastor, Pastor Miles, who supported and pushed this, and a congregation that supported this, and it's not because Genesis is for those people who really need it, it's because Genesis is for people who are just like me and you. Imperfect, broken, disasters, who need God's grace. And when you come and you're served by the love that God provides, when you receive His forgiveness and when you receive His affirmation, even in your brokenness, what happens is you take that home. And you see the people around you. And you see how they need grace too. You can't give them the big G, salvation that Jesus gives, that kind of grace, but you can offer them some little g grace, some unconditional love. You can look at them and remember that the love that they need has to come out from outside of them. It's not about them when I'm in this relationship. It's not about what's wrong with her. It's about me going to her and offering some unconditional love. And you know what? It's unexpected. When I don't want to, sometimes that's the time when I most need to do it. And the motivation for that goes back to what I said at the very beginning. Am I tired of trying to be good? Yeah. Because I can't do that on my own. I'll never measure up. Jesus came to save sinners, of whom I am the foremost. And He points me out. He says, they do too. May we never ever forget that. May we never ever forget the importance of being around God's Word, getting in Bible study, and allowing God's truth to hit our hearts where it's most needed. For the sake of Jesus. Amen.